This video is sponsored by Squarespace, but I'll tell you more about them later. I went rock hunting this week. The idea is to try and get bigger rocks for this kinetic sculpture. I found a really beautiful rock, which I want to use for the lighter end of the sculpture. It weighs around 15 kilograms. And so if we're going to mimic the same sculpture, just on a larger scale, to calculate how heavy the heavier rock needs to be to lift up the 15 kilogram rock, we need to just know the pivot point and the length of the cantilever. The cantilever is going to be about 2 meters. The bar is going to be about 2.6. And I want that pivot point to be 60 centimeters away from my heavy rock. So I used ChatGPT to calculate how heavy that rock needs to be, and ChatGPT said it needs to be 85 kilograms. So my friend Philip and I, same Philip who made the end of this pencil holder, the driller, downstairs, we went out looking for bigger rocks, something around 85 to 90 kgs. We found a really beautiful rock, and the plan was to tie the rock up with rope on the top and thread the pole through the rope. Then we could carry it on our shoulders. We got the top around the rock, wrapped some rope around it all, and the pole just snapped. So we went back, found a much bigger pole. This one was hardened steel, definitely not going to break. And we went out looking for rocks again. Fast forward to core drilling these rocks. Trying to get this one ready was quite an ordeal. We needed a 50 millimeter hole, which is quite a massive core drill. Drilling these holes takes a long time and a lot of water. The water is to make sure that the drill bit doesn't overheat and become soft. There's actually quite a lot about hard metal and soft metal in this sculpture, which I'll tell you about a bit later. Before we got to drilling, we decided to actually weigh the rocks. Before now, we've just been lifting them up and guessing how heavy they are. Lifting them up is a euphemism. It's impossible to just lift that rock up. I like to gamify everything, so I turned it into a bet to see who could guess most accurately how heavy the rocks weighed. I guessed 12 kilograms because I'm so strong. Dan guessed 15 kilograms because he's not so strong, and the scale guessed 28 kilograms, which shocked all three of us. So we needed to recalculate a few things if we wanted the pivot point to be 2 meters away from the smaller rock. We then weighed our heavy rock, this one over here, and being humbled by the previous experience, I guessed 120 kilograms. Dan guessed 115 kilograms, and the scale guessed error, which was surprising again to all of us. The scale maxes out at 150 kilograms, but it turns out that we just had the rock slightly off balance on the scale, so it was breaking one of the sensors. When we got it balanced correctly, the scale said around 138, 140 kilograms, which is the same weight as Ollie LaRue. So now we have another problem. Our pivot point with this weight will be too close to Ollie. So we needed a heavier rock on the other side to try and shift that pivot point a little bit closer to the center. So we got another heavier rock, and the scale said 50 kilograms, which Dan guessed immediately. He's got a background in construction, so he knows what cement bags weigh. Okay, so this is the big rock sculpture. And speaking of hard metals and soft metals, this part over here is where all the scary stuff is happening. So we have a really hard bit of hardened steel. I wanted to use tungsten carbide, but that's really expensive and harder to get. This is tool steel or high-speed steel, which is also super hard and will do the job just fine. The problem is that this is a brass tube, so the harder steel just started to bore into the brass really quickly, and we needed to find a way to protect the brass. So we created this little collar out of hardened steel as well. So there's a harder steel tube inside the brass tube to help just keep it rigid. The problem is that that creates a whole another level of failure, which can happen and allow the sculpture to kind of slip and crush anyone who's sitting close to it. This thing is terrifying. The other interesting thing is we brushed some graphite powder on the pivot point. Graphite's often used as a lubricant for heavy engineering things. And so the goal is to try and create more efficiency on the spinning axis, which will be very cool. And I think it worked out. It's been spinning really, really well today. So we might have to touch it up a little bit before exhibition night, but the sculpture's working really well. I also added another little pivot point and another balancing rock sculpture on the smaller of the two rocks to try and bring the center of gravity a little bit further out this way so that it doesn't take up so much room in the studio. But yeah, this thing was a lot more intense than I thought it was going to be, but I'm really, really glad to have it up. The drawings are coming along really well. I'm enjoying the rock texture at the bottom of the current drawing very much. Every time I run into a little problem, I have these slabs that I can just kind of chip away at and try and figure out how the light would fall on that texture. So I'm just studying the reference and then inventing the texture as I go along. It's been really fun to use different references to slowly develop an understanding of how light falls on these slabs with all the cracks. And it becomes really cathartic once you figure something like that out. You can work much faster, but also be creative with your mark making. This has been my escape over the last few weeks. Working in the evenings when the studio is empty and listening to my books has really helped me nourish my relationship with drawing. This show is meant to be an exercise in completing the circle. What I mean by closing the circle is the final stage of an artwork. The final brush mark or pencil stroke is not where the creative journey ends, in my opinion. The story is completed by how someone else might attach meaning to moments in your work that you have no control over. So I've actively been trying to cultivate intention around completing the circle. And that's been the theme for this show for me and for a few people who are taking part with me. I've just been encouraging everyone in the studio to find a project that is almost finished and use this as momentum or impetus to show your artworks to others and allow them to reflect against it. I think practicing something like this is extremely important for creatives, especially creatives who find themselves dreaming a lot. If you start a lot of projects and then end up not finishing them, there's a lot of dopamine involved in dreaming or starting something new, but as soon as it gets a little bit difficult, we tend to let them go. So being aware of that and creating the challenge to try and complete the circle can be really helpful in just giving that extra little bit of energy into finishing the creative act. I'm going to see if I can do a weekly update next week as well, but as the studio is closing, I might not be able to. So there's going to be a few weeks that we miss, and then I'm going to start the series back up next year and hopefully have some fun stories to share with you guys then. Before I end this video, I just want to give a quick shout out to this video sponsor, Squarespace. I've been working with them for a couple of years now, and they've played a huge role in my career, not only in helping me maintain this channel by sponsoring these videos, but early on in my career, I was looking for a way to showcase my work and make it easy for collectors to find me and get in touch with me. I didn't have time to learn how to use HTML and to code and build a beautiful, reliable website, and I found that Squarespace could do all of that really effortlessly. I never had to patch or upgrade anything. I could register a domain with them and set up an online store. And most importantly, I could design a portfolio and show my work the way that I wanted to. Also, every time I got stuck, their amazing support team helped me out instantly. So if you're looking at building a website, give Squarespace a try. And if you decide that you love them, use the software code and get 10% off your first purchase. There we go. I hope you guys found this video entertaining. I'm very keen to see how this sculpture goes. Thanks for the support. Wish me luck, and I'll see you guys in the next one.